Welcome to Driftwood Guitars. I'm Chris. Behind the camera is Matt, as always, and it's another episode of the 3,000-year-old guitar build series. Today we're doing inlays. We're not going to do the how to make an inlay. That's a whole separate video series one day in the long, long future from now. But we're going to show you how to actually take an inlay and then inlay it into the guitar. We need to do two different inlays on this neck today. We're going to do our fret marker inlays going down the fretboard, and then we're also going to be doing one inlay on the back of the headstock over here for the client. But the first thing that I want to do is show you guys how to go about kind of just placing your inlays and figuring out how to mark them so that you can actually cut the pocket out. So we'll do that with the fretboard here. What we're going to do on this guitar is we're going to do my basic kind of deluxe style fret markers. I made these on the CNC machine months and months ago, but I've got them all here in my hand. So what I needed to do was find the center line on my fretboard, and I've already done that with these pencil lines that you can probably not see on camera.
Actually, they're showing up.
Okay, cool. So I've gone ahead and I've marked them. I've marked them only on the frets that we're going to do these on. So on an acoustic guitar, and on pretty much any guitar, it's the fret markers are on 3, 5, 7, 9, 12, 15, 17, 19, and then if you're doing electrics, you've got frets even further down where you do fret markers. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set these on here just so that I can make sure that I've got them just in the right order, just in the order of the design that we've cut them out. And then we're going to tack them on with a little bit of super glue so that we can move on to actually tracing them out and getting them exactly where we need them to go. So what I like to use is my number 20. I don't typically find the exact center of between the two frets. I like to use my eyeballs and just do it that way. But what we're going to do is very lightly tack these on because we do need to pull them back off again without breaking them. That is the important thing to remember. We don't want to go absolutely nuts with this. We just need to tack it. So that's kind of the amount of glue that I'm going to put on there. Hopefully that's showing up on camera. And then I'm going to get right above it with my head, and I'm just going to set it exactly where I want to. I'm not going to use any accelerant because I don't want to make this dry too quick. I want to have time to get it all lined up where I'm happy. So we'll call that good, and we're just going to do the same thing all the way down the fretboard, taking our time to make sure that everything is right on the center and also kind of level. We interrupt this programming to tell you guys a little bit about some of the products that we sell. One of them being this awesome paint handle. For those of you that are maybe respraying a guitar or following along with one of our builds, and you're looking, how can I hold my guitar while I spray it? We have the solution. Check these guys out. We have them in a link down below, as well as our fret caddies that we've started selling. And these are awesome for refrets or just general guitar maintenance. You put your loose frets inside of here, your bridge pins here, and any sort of metallic hardware that you have inside of there, just to help keep your workbench organized. So check those out. We do have links down below, and we'll ship them today. I do recommend that if you're doing fret markers, you triple count. So go down your fretboard and like 3 times, make sure that you actually are doing the correct fret markers.
Have you ever?
I may or may not have inlaid guitars on the wrong fret markers. Actually, I don't know any guitar builders that haven't done that at least at some point in their career. I've gotten like the 13th fret. I've put a 12th marker fret on a 13th fret a couple times, and then I built an octave mandolin for a buddy of mine for Beholder, and I didn't know that the octave, I guess, there's a fret marker on the 13th fret, not the 12th fret. Oh. And I build this guitar for the client, and he takes delivery of it. And he didn't say anything on delivery day. The next day, he texts me. He's like, "Hey, I didn't want to say it, but that's not how it's supposed to go." So I had to fill the hole and fix it. So I learned something that day. Okay, so we've got all those guys in place. So now that they're there, hit them with a little bit of accelerant here just to kind of get them cemented in place. Okay, so what we need to do now before we can actually inlay these into the wood is to mark where they go and then pop them off so that we can route that pocket out. I think that makes sense. It's kind of in general understanding of how inlays work, right? You've got your material, so now we've got to make a pocket for that material to go into so that the whole thing is completely flush. What I like to use is a dental pick. You can get these things on Amazon. They're absolutely like peanuts. You can probably get like a 20 pack for really, really cheap. These things work really, really great for both cleaning teeth I do Matt's. Matt does mine every Friday. But no, these things work really great for a lot of things. I like to use them because they scratch the wood and they leave a good mark. So instead of showing you guys, 6 different inlays on this guitar, what we're going to do is I'm going to flip this over and I'm going to show you this technique on an inlay that's a little bit more complex. And as you can see, what we've made is a crown inlay to go on the back of this guitar. It represents a lot of things for the client. It's super cool. That inlay has been completely made, and now it's time to get it inlaid. So the process is the same no matter how complex an inlay is, but this back one has some different little nooks and crannies, and I'll have an opportunity to show you guys some different techniques because of that. So it's exactly where we want. We've already gone and done all the measuring. It's already been tacked on. This thing's not moving anywhere. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take our dental pick, and I like to have a little bit of a burr on the end of it, and this one has that. And I'm just gonna come in here, and we're gonna trace the whole thing.
Are you putting a lot of pressure there?
Yeah, and I'm doing multiple passes because it's tough to tell whether you're getting a good line until after you've popped it off, and once you've popped it off, it's kind of too late. So I go through and I really make sure.
Cheap insurance.
Exactly. And that's why I like to have a burr, because it makes a good deep line. If you're doing this over like a softer wood, like a maple or mahogany, you don't have to push nearly as hard. In fact, it can be easy to kind of like get tear out almost. The fibers of the wood will tear, so you just kind of, be careful with that. But I'll flip it around so that I can get at it from different angles and just go through the whole thing and trace it out. I want to make sure that I'm kind of leaning my my dental pick into the inlay. I don't want it to be going this way because otherwise I'm actually making it so that the line is kind of really far away from where the inlay is going to go. We want to get it right up against that line of it. And if you have a really, really small inlay, you have to be careful not to break it while you do this, because I am pushing kind of hard into the inlay. The older I get, the harder this gets because it's harder to see. So I wear my my Dan Erlewine Optivisors right on. Matt and I think we've made this joke before on the channel, but we have a theory that Dan Erlewine, he has his Optivisor surgically installed.
I'm just saying, I'm sure I've seen him without those Optivisors on, but I just can't think of any time right now.
I think he's got like bolts, like threaded inserts, and he just puts the front half on.
Yeah.
That's the way to do it. Tell your doctor, no, but it's for work.
Yeah.
And then I'll come over here and we'll fall down and we'll break that. I'm glad that kind of showed up on camera. So we just broke the tip of this off just ever so slightly. So what I can do is I'm gonna, without doing too much moving of things around, I'm just gonna get a little bit of number 20 in there and we're gonna put it back on. These things happen all the time. And then I'm just gonna push it back.
So now would be a bad moment to sneeze?
No, you joke, but like I do, you kind of get used to like not breathing heavy around your inlays when you have really, really tiny pieces, because you get that natural habit of like when you're woodworking all the time, you're just blowing dust off of everything all the time, and it's really easy to like kind of be not mindful and go, and all of a sudden your part's completely gone. So I think we've got the whole thing scribed. I do like to come through with, and just really, really look and make sure that I've got everything, not just scribed, but scribed deep enough that it'll actually be visible and everything looks good. So what I'll do next is we're gonna pop that thing off. And what I like to use is just a straight razor, and I like to get really nice and low.
It's not technically a straight razor.
It's not, yeah, you're right. It's just it's just a razor.
Listen, either I tell you or someone on the internet tells you, and they won't be as nice as me. So.
But look, so we're gonna slide this under here. I'm rocking it. There you go, and she popped right off. Nothing crazy. You don't want to get in there and like pry it off, because then you're gonna break it. It's just gonna happen every single time. So absolutely almost impossible to see, right? So what I like to do now is I can take the largest piece of chalk that you have. You want to just find the biggest one.
Preferably one from your kid.
Exactly.
Steal it while he's using it, actually.
And we're gonna take that and we're gonna run over this whole thing. And I'm gonna go like with the grain, against the grain, kind of just going in swirly marks here, starting to bring it out. I don't like to drive it over the where the super glue was, because that just makes it a big mess. So we'll go like this. Yeah, now we're really good. And then you can take that razor blade and just scrape off most of that. And huzzah! we've got something that we can actually use now. Okay, so now we know where our inlay needs to go. We've got that marked out, we've traced it, we know everything is really good to go. If we're very careful with our router, we're gonna make that pocket exactly the size of our inlay piece, and it's gonna pop right in. So what do we use to inlay the pocket, I guess, is the big question for folks. Some folks will try to get away with doing this with like a trim router, like a rigid or insert whatever brand you want here. Problem with those is that they're very, very large and they're really clumsy, they're really top heavy, you can't be delicate with them. They have a 1/4 inch collet on them, so you can only use a minimum of a 1/4 inch bit, something that maybe tapers down to a 1/16 of an inch or something like that. But what you really need to do is get yourself either a Fordham tool or a Dremel tool. What I'm using is what's called a Fordham tool. Matt can zoom up here and show you. The motor of it is way up here. We keep it hung. I got this used forever ago on eBay. They're absolutely amazing. They'll last forever. It just kind of like allows me to have a bigger motor than I would with the Dremel tool. But the big one, and this is what you have seen these if you're looking into building guitars, is the base, this StewMac Dremel tool router base. I've had it for so long. This is actually the very first thing, my very first order I ever made for guitar building was with this thing. I've had it for almost 20 years at this point. It's absolutely awesome. It works with Dremel and it works with these Fordham bits. It's small, it allows me to do a lot of things. I used to use that same base for cutting my fret slots and doing all kinds of things. So if you're on the fence about buying one of these bases, don't be, because you'll use it for absolute ever. It's not just StewMac that sells them, there are other companies that have them. Obviously, we are an affiliate of StewMac, so we'll have a link to that down below. And all of those things that you buy through our links do help Matt and I out, so we do appreciate that. What I'd like to do on inlays that have like tight little corners, which this one does have. If it's a round inlay, this doesn't apply. But something that has tight corners, what we need to do is we're going to do a two-step operation. At first, we're going to use this is I don't know what size bit this is. It's I think a 1/16 of an inch. It feels right. Why not? We're going to use that to kind of clear out the bulk of the pocket, and then we're going to switch over to this really tiny bit, which is I don't even know what size this is. We'll put a link to it in the description down below, though. We'll put that thing in, and then that's going to allow me to just clean out those really tiny little corners. So we'll get like 95% of it done with the large bit, and then we'll switch to the smaller bit. But what we need to do is we need to set the depth to this bit. So you're going to take the material that you're inlaying, and I like to set it right here. And well, look at that, I got it right out of the box, so I'm not even going to adjust it. But it's pretty much perfect. If anything, you kind of want to route on the shallow side. So that way you maybe have a little bit of the inlay still sticking up is kind of the better way to do it, at least in my opinion. Because if it's too low in the pocket, then you either have to sand all the material to get it level, or you have to backfill with some sort of epoxy or super glue, and that can cause other issues with finish and bubbles and all of that stuff. So try to get it set up right out of the box, get that thing dialed in. And you can adjust the depth really finely with all of the screws that are on here, but we obviously don't need to do that. Then what we're going to do is we're going to put this thing in the vise. If you don't have a vise, you're going to find a way to get this thing strapped down to your workbench, because you really want it to be really stable. We've got one of these pattern makers vices, and they work super good. So I'm going to put it in there. What I like to do with headstocks is I like to get it so that the headstock is perfectly horizontal. That way it doesn't feel awkward and weird to me. And I'm going to grab a chair. I'm going to get everything really nice and set up and get myself really comfortable, because if you're not comfortable, if you're kind of like sitting in an awkward way or standing in an awkward way, you're just going to mess it up, I promise. So take your time, figure out how to get your workstation really set up so that you're super comfortable. So that's what we're going to do right now. All right, so kind of nice and comfy. I've got the headstock right where it's really comfortable for me, right in front of the air conditioner, so we're good to go. Little pro tip. While your piece that you're inlaying is not on the guitar, I typically have like a couple of spots in my shop where I can put them. A lot of times I have mine and I just put it up on my glue tray. That's just my spot. I just know that if I can't find it, it's probably up there. So do that, because the worst thing in the world, and this has happened to me before, is you've made your pocket and now you lose the thing you're inlaying, especially if it's a hand cut inlay. You're never going to make it fit that same pocket again. So don't lose your bit. We've got our router bit set to its full depth, so all we're going to do is we're going to turn it on and we're going to start cutting. I'm obviously not going to be able to talk while I've got the machine running, so I was just going to kind of run through just some basic explainers here that you'll see on camera. I always start in the middle. I also make sure that I drop in at an angle like this. I just like to come in nice and slow, and what we're going to do is I'm going to start in the middle and I'm going to start working my way out. I'm going to turn this so that you guys can see this on camera a little bit better. So we're going to start here, and we're going to start working our way out, and then I'm just going to slowly start, almost like I'm a little baby CNC machine. We're going to start kind of clearing out that whole pocket, and then we're going to slowly work ourselves up to the very edge of that chalk line, and then we're just going to come and we're just going to kiss. We're going to get rid of the chalk line, but we're not going to go any further than that. We only want to be like 2/1000ths of an inch larger than the actual piece that we're inlaying. So we're just going to kiss it. And any spots like down here in the corner where this bit will not actually, I don't know if that's going to show in focus, but down here in the corner where this bit won't fit, that's fine. We're going to stop, and then we're going to switch out to the smaller bit, and then we'll be able to get into those little corners and clean those out. So I think that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. All right, so let's fire it up and let's get it done. All right, so I wanted to stop and show you guys what's going on here. Using that like 16th inch bit, like I said, we've routed this whole main section out. I like to do it this way because it allows me to kind of like have just a moment of like not having to concentrate too hard. I am paying attention, obviously, but I just mostly am just kind of getting a sense of how the wood's gonna act with my router bit. You really need to be paying attention to which direction is the grain wanting to tear out. If I go counterclockwise versus clockwise, does that cause the router bit to act a certain way? Pay attention to all of that stuff because it's that little micro levels of like beta, as they say in rock climbing, that you're gonna need when you start getting right up against that chalk line. You really, if you want to get it right the first time, you need to be able to anticipate what your router bit's gonna do. The good news on this guitar and on most fretboards is that with it being ebony, is that if there are any gaps, is that when you put your inlay in, you're going to be able to backfill it with black sawdust, and it's basically invisible anyway, but it's just good practice to have anyways to try to get it as perfect as possible. So what I'll do now is we're going to keep the same bit on, and I am just going to be way much more deliberate with my motions this time. I'm going to try to get obviously most of all of this bottom piece completely done. I'm going to get all of this cleaned out. I'm not going to get inside the points of the crown, but I am going to get all of the stuff leading up to it, and then we'll switch out to that other bit. All right, so we just finished cleaning it out with the small bit. Looks really, really nice. I wanted to mention something that works out really well for those smaller bits. Like I said, they have much smaller flutes on them, so they're much less likely to kind of like catch and like gouge in. So what you can do with a smaller bit like that is you can kind of just do the whole perimeter and it without risking, you know, gouging into the top. So it's an easy way to kind of like just overall make the whole inlay pocket just a little bit bigger with kind of low risk. I always go in a counterclockwise direction when doing that. But what I was just showing Matt is at this point, we lay this on here and it looks really, really close, but it's just not quite right yet. So what you do at this point is I'll come in here and just really, really try to figure out exactly where things are catching. And then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna do one more cleanup pass with my small bit and get everything cleaned out. And for me, what I can tell is I really just need to remove more material kind of over here, especially around these 2 points over here, and then just a little bit around that one. And I think that we should be good to go. What you don't want to do at this point is take a hammer and try to get this thing smashed in, because you're never going to get it out again. It's probably, it's going to break when you go to do it because the pocket's not the right size. So you're going to blow out half of the inlay. And then when you go to take it out, you're going to break it even more, and you're going to be sad. So don't do that. Take your time at this point. Try to get it right. You want it to fit in there. You don't want it to drop in, but you want it to fit with some friction. But you want to make sure that when you go to do it, because it's a one-time thing, that you don't break it when you do that. So I'll just turn the machine on one more time and just clean out kind of the areas that I see. We'll check again. I might have to do it a few more times, but I think I can get it with just one more cleanup pass. All right, so it took like 2 more times off camera for me to get this thing exactly where I wanted it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna set this on here. Things look a little ragged right now, and that's totally fine. There we go, ish. It's gonna be really difficult to tell how you know, where there's gaps and not just because of shadows and things like that. But there's some spots where there's a little bit more gaps than I typically would want. There's some spots where it's a little bit tighter. A lot of the times it kind of just all comes out in the wash when we go to press this thing in. So what we're gonna do now that I'm confident that when I go to push this in that I'm not gonna break any part of it, and that's the main thing, I'm looking for any snags on things that'll break, is we've got our pocket. I'm gonna take some 5-minute epoxy. I like to use this quick cure stuff. It's 5 minutes, so we want to be kind of...
the clock is ticking, actually, dude.
Yeah, Matt and I kind of... No, I haven't mixed it yet.
Oh, okay.
Matt and I always kind of like watch each other when we mix up 5-minute epoxy, because it's like that, go, 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 go.
It is a spectator sport.
Yeah, you got to make sure that you got all your clamps ready to go. So we've got our quick cure 5-minute. We're going to put a little bit of black tint inside of it, so that any sort of gaps that we might have, they'll be completely invisible on a black background like this. If you are doing an inlay over a different species of wood, like a cherry or a maple or anything like that, a lighter colored wood, what you can do is you can actually mix sawdust into your epoxy. That really helps. If it's a small inlay, you can actually use number 10 super glue to just wick it in and get it going. But when you've got something that's a little bit larger like this, where it's going to be harder to get glue all the way down on the inside, I definitely recommend that you use epoxy. So we're going to mix that up. Once it's in there, we'll put the epoxy inside of it. I'm going to set this on top, and we're going to clamp this thing in place, and that's how it's all going to go in. What I don't do, and I'm saying all this so that I'm not having to talk while my epoxy's curing. What I don't want to do, and I don't want people to do at home, is to get this thing on here and then go whack and hit it with a hammer. Because that's what the reaction to a lot of people is. They try to hammer their inlay in, and you're probably going to make it break if you do that. So what I like to do is to get it exactly where you want it to be. You know, imagine there's epoxy in there. I'm going to set this very carefully on top as just a release agent, and then we're going to set this on top of that, and we're going to clamp it. And when we clamp it, everything should slide into place. The epoxy acts as kind of a lubricant to get everything to go in without any sort of edges breaking off. So that's why it's really important that you make sure that pocket is clear of the edges before you do it, because we're going to do this whole thing completely blind. And if there's any binding issues, you'll go to clamp this thing on, you're going to be like, yeah, and then you go to pull it off, and like this whole side doesn't even fit inside the pocket, and it's all squished out. So that's where it's important to just like quadruple check your work here. So we'll get this mixed up, and we'll get it pressed into place real quick. This is one where it's kind of like a little bit of squeeze out is a good thing. That's because we're using this epoxy as a little bit of a filler. I mean, the dream is always to have an absolutely perfect pocket, so you don't have any gaps to fill at all, but that's just not always the case.
When you're doing it by hand.
When you're doing it by hand, so I'm going to backfill those 2 dots there that I know need a little bit of extra loving. So 5-minute epoxy, so we're going quick. The color does slow it down just a little bit when you add the color. All right, so here's the moment of truth. All right, so we've got this sit on here. It starts to get even harder to see when you've got the epoxy in, so you can just feel when it starts to lock in, so like it's not moving on me right now, so I know it's exactly where I want it to be. We're gonna put that on there. We're gonna set this on top of it, try not to shift it at all, and try not to shift it at all here either, and we're just gonna slowly apply some pressure. And the reason why you want to use that is because it pushes on the whole thing all at the same time. It distributes that clamping pressure across the whole thing. So what you can do now is you can take a look, and you can see, look through our peel ply here. Obviously, we've got all the squeeze out in the world going on. Everything looks really, really good though. So I know that we've got no gaps. It's fully in place. And I honestly don't even need to clamp it now. In fact, I'm going to not clamp it because I got like a little low spot here. That I want to go ahead and try to get some of that wet epoxy out of. The same thing here. We're going to sand this material down anyway, so it's not a big deal, but we can kind of remove some of that material now. Wipe it down with some naphtha and wait for this to cure before we sand it level. Okay, so on the front of the fretboard, what we still need to do, obviously, is install all of those fret markers that we just tacked onto the front of this. The process there is exactly the same as the crown inlay that we just did on the back here. So what I'm going to do in lieu of showing you guys how to do this, because essentially I have done that, is I'm going to install the side markers on the fretboard, because that's the last of the inlays that we need to put on this guitar. Oh, I forgot to show you guys this. We ended up doing a small inlay here on the side of the neck. To thine own sound be true. That's what Will wanted. Went over to my buddy's house and used his laser etcher, because that is literally impossible to inlay by hand. But we did a really deep etch with his laser cutter, and then I filled that with black epoxy, and then we sanded it totally smooth, and I'm super excited with it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys how to mark out and install your side dots on the guitar, and by the time that we're done with that, the back of this should be done, and we can level sand it. So let me get the things out so that we can show you how to do that. Okay, So side dots, it's something that a lot of the times I almost forget about until right before we go in the booth, so I'm excited that I'm remembering on time here.
Sometimes we do forget.
Yeah, sometimes we do forget. But what I like to use for guitars like this, I always use a contrasting color, obviously. We've got maple binding, a maple neck, so we're gonna use black side dots. And you can get like just the individual dots, but I like to get these rods. They're just way better. These are 2mm plastic. I've got them in white, black, cream. I even sometimes go to like local hobby shops, like in the model section, a lot of the train sections will have different like colored plastic rods that you can use for all kinds of different things. And something else that you can do if you're really looking to do something fun is you can actually get different metals as well. You can get aluminums, coppers, and brasses a lot of the times at hobby shops as well. So just something fun that you can do. What I do, just like I did here, other than marking where the center of the fretboard was, you remember I didn't measure the distance between the two frets. And I do the same thing with my side dots. I like to kind of just get directly over my fretboard, and I'm just going to come here and I'm going to close one eye, and we're just going to mark the center of each fret, exactly where we have our fret markers, right? So we're just marking. This is going to be the 12th fret, so there's going to be 2 fret markers, 15, 17, and 19. And that's going to get us all of our fret markers. So what I am going to do, just like on the fretboard, is I am going to measure the thickness of our binding, and I'm going to mark the center of that. So we'll get our calipers out, and we'll measure that, and we'll make sure that we get these marked before we drill our holes for them to go in. So we're at 4mm, so we're going to go 2, and I just like to kind of just lightly hit it. It's probably not even picking up on camera, just the lightest of touches. All right, so I'm going to put this in the vise, and I know that we're doing this a little weird because, you know, it's for a video. The order's a little off. But I'll take my scratch all, or scratch some. Oh, here it is.
Scratch loss.
Yeah, you can use either scratch all or you can even use your dental pick. In fact, we'll just stick with a dental pick. And I'm just going to go through and I'm going to mark those with a little bit more authority so that we know that we've got them exactly where we want to. This is another good opportunity to count again and make sure that you're actually marking these in the right spot. Some of you might be like, well, you should measure to make it perfect. And you know what? You could measure and make it perfect. But the thing that happens is the way that your eye sees these fret markers, because of the perspective, is that, you know, you're looking at it down kind of in a cone shape. The way that your vision works is that you really can't see exactly if they're on center anyway. So it's like, as long as they're like 95% of the way dead on center, you're never going to be like, wow, that's not right. So it's just quicker and easier to do it this way. So I'm going to get a 2mm drill bit, brad point drill bit. Very, very important. Make sure you use a brad point bit, because if you don't, you're going to blow out a whole bunch of the wood and it's going to look ugly. So I'm going to find somewhere my 2mm brad point drill bit. Light pressure here. And I say light pressure because you don't want this thing to walk on you. If it walks, it's going to want to like kind of go down the neck. And then it messes up kind of the way that the dot looks. It's kind of sloppy all around the edge. I think Matt's had the joy of experiencing that before.
Oh, yeah.
Smarter people do this earlier in the process, you know that, Matt. Like, people do this before they even carve the neck. They go ahead and install their side markers. That way it kind of all gets done at the same time. We should do that sometime.
But then we'd be smart like them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so those are good to go. What I like to do with these, because a lot of the times, you know, once you install them, I cut them with just a pair of wire cutters, and that puts like a little burr on the end of them. So what I like to do is to take a chisel, and I just put clean edges on all of these, so just a nice fresh leading edge on them. I used to have a lot more of these, and I could do an entire fretboard just in one quick layup, but I do not have more than 4 of them right now. So I'll show you the process. So we got our clean edges all facing the same way. We're looking good. We just need to find our 20. So I'm going to put just a little bit of number 20 inside the first 4 here. You don't want to put too much because you don't want to create like a hydraulic lock kind of a situation. Clean edge first. just gonna, I know my hands are in the way. Just a little hammer and she's in. All right, those are in, so we can hit those up, and then we're just gonna cut them.
Yeah, so actually the thing I've been trying on this is I haven't been using wire cutters, Chris. I've been using a brand new razor blade, and then you don't get the, because it's the pinching that distresses the plastic that makes it white. Yeah, so I just use a really, really sharp razor blade, like brand new, and yeah.
Yeah, Matt gave me the pro tips here, so that, and I typically find a lot of times too, if you move it while you do it too.
Yeah,
right?
You slice it, and then it's.
Did I get it?
Yeah, close enough.
Yeah, and I'm cutting it off proud, so it's banging into it just to avoid any more of that. But yeah, that worked really good. So you can use, there you go, that one was pretty flush. And then what you'll see too is that, see how that one turned a little bit white? But we can take our chisel, and obviously you're gonna still hit this with a little bit of sandpaper before we go into the booth anyway, but the chisel will do the same thing, and I can take that and I can slowly just get that right to where we want, see? So we just need to install the rest of these the same way, but I think you get the idea there. And if you have a whole bunch of those little sticks, you can do the entire fretboard just in one quick sitting. What I like to do if you are using cutters is you'll just cut it a little high, leave yourself a little bit of proudness on there, and then you can just come back with a nice sharp chisel and clean it off. So 2 different ways of doing it, and all that stuff. So those are in. Makes life a lot easier once we start to install all of our frets too, because we're not going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, so we're installing all of our frets. Now that we've got the side dots inlaid, the next thing that we would obviously need to do is install all of our fret marker inlays, but we're not going to cover all that again because, like I said, we did all of that on the back of this headstock. The process is exactly the same. The only thing I'd say is different. If you're just doing dots for your fret markers, you can do that with just a drill bit, obviously. That's pretty straightforward and easy to understand. But yeah, we'll come through, we'll trace all these out, we'll route our pockets out, and we'll inlay them all, and then we're gonna level sand them. And speaking of level sand, we have not level sanded the back of this. It's still not dry yet, but we are gonna wrap this video up here, and we're gonna reveal how good this crown came out in the next episode, which will be about installing all of the frets on this neck. And we're getting so close to getting ready to get this thing in the paint booth, so do stick around. We're going to have links to everything you guys saw in this video down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.